Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the spring games that went on this past Saturday, and now it's time to talk about transfer portal. We know that I've talked about it quite a few times. This spring portal is going to be off the walls. There's going to be a ton of players that maybe you didn't expect. There's going to be a ton of turnover and roster management going on over the next couple of weeks, and let's start with kind of the big boys, what the big dogs are going to be doing during this time, because there's some significant holes in some of these teams that if they don't get fixed, they might just not be the team that you expect them to be. So let's start with Georgia, the top team in the country by a lot of people's estimation. And the problem here is going to be the problem with a lot of these teams, as you'll find, and it's the defensive tackle position. If you ask any Georgia fan what was missing from that 2023 team that was remarkably talented on offense, did a ton of really good things on the back end of that defense, they would tell you the defensive line was not a Georgia defensive line. It just wasn't up to the standard, the level that we've become so accustomed to. I mean, you had guys like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter coming through there, so the ability was absolutely off the charts. And there was always going to be somewhat of a step back, but but there was quite a significant one last year, and I think it's something that Georgia's been trying to avoid. They did add Xavier McLeod from South Carolina in the portal, have Nazir Stackhouse coming back, who could have gone to the NFL draft, which is huge, but it's just not looking the way that I think Georgia fans, or Kirby Smart in particular, wants it to look right now. So I think that's definitely a position where they will be after guys. I think they're going to need to bring in at least one guy. I think they'll be mostly okay. I think Xavier McLeod's going to be a huge player for them. I think Nazir Stackhouse is going to be really solid, but you need difference makers if you're Georgia. And when you look up and down this roster, it's not that there's not guys that could be that difference maker, but there's not that clear-cut candidate. So it'll be interesting to see what Georgia does in the portal. It'll be interesting to see if someone comes on the market that is up to that standard that they're looking for. But at the end of the day, they absolutely need to build out the interior of that defense. And if they can fill out defensive tackle, this defense could be on the same level as some of the former defenses we've seen at Georgia. So very excited about what they can do there. Another team looking for a defensive tackle is Texas, another team that is towards the top of these rankings that we always see around. And this is a very sound roster. I'll be totally honest. I think there are a ton of NFL talent guys on this roster, not only on the first line, but in the second and the third line. There are tons of guys up and down this roster that will be playing on Sundays, but one of the areas that looks a little bit thinner than most is that defensive tackle position. Replacing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy is nearly impossible. It's not something that you're fully going to be able to do. You are going to take a slight step back, but there are guys that can step up. Alfred Collins, Jere Bledsoe are two guys that are big-time players for them this upcoming year. They brought in, I want to pronounce this right, Tialoi Savai from Arizona. So another defensive tackle to kind of help things over there as a rotational piece, but I think they still want another one. I think they still need probably a rotational piece. It seems like Alfred Collins and someone like Vernon Broughton is kind of finding their way into those starting roles there. But at the end of the day, you need as many defensive tackles as possible, especially when you're replacing the talent that they're replacing from a year ago. So I think that's another team that will be after defensive tackles, and there's not going to be enough of them to go around, is the way I'll put it. And then let's get to Bama and a little bit of a different angle here. I think they're outside of their offense and their defense just need a little bit of work. Their wide receiver room is really interesting. I think it's a good wide receiver room. I think they have a number of guys in that room that are capable of making big-time plays for them. But when you look up and down the list, I think it's a wide receiver room full of wide receiver 2s and no wide receiver 1s. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get one from the spring portal, but I think they'll be looking to add at least to the group that they have right now. Because although I have big-time hopes for Jalen Hale going into this new season, I'm not necessarily sure that he's going to make that step, and I don't think anyone is. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's any wide receivers that pop onto the scene that fit that bill. And I think if they do and if they can add the right guy, I think this wide receiver group could be a lot more talented and a lot better than some people are expecting right now. But DB is probably the biggest area. It was absolutely gutted after Saban left, and they got Keon Saab from Michigan, which was absolutely huge. But they're probably going to need one or two more guys in that area just to make everything very, very comfortable and not have to worry about that too much. Obviously, you have Malachi Moore back there to be a leader, so if you bring in someone, you can put him under his wing and let him kind of lead them to the Bama way. But at the end of the day, I think they will definitely be bringing in pieces. I don't think wide receiver and DB is going to be where it stops necessarily for Alabama. I think DeBoer is still in the process of building out the roster that he wants, and this could be a big-time portal window for Bama in a number of different ways. So definitely be on the lookout for them, not only for wide receiver and DBs, but for a ton of positions. And then Florida State, another defensive tackle need here. I think Braden Fisk walking out the door is absolutely huge. He was honestly the best player on this defense down the stretch. He was absolutely dominant in the ACC championship game. Finding a replacement is going to be really, really tough. Now, they have some guys there that are very talented. They have the ability to step up, but it's the same situation that we talked about with Texas and with Georgia, where you want to be more solid and you want to be more confident going into this next year. So I think that's what they're going to be looking for. I think the edge rushing is going to be really good, but at the end of the day, edge rushing doesn't mean too much if the guy is able to step up into the pocket and escape because your defensive tackles can't get off their block. So defensive tackle is definitely going to be the place that Florida State attacks the most. Whether or not the supply meets the demand, we'll find out. Another team looking at defensive line, but I view this kind of more as a full defensive line makeover, would be Oregon. I think Jamari Caldwell was a great pickup at defensive tackle, but I think they need more additions. I think that they have Damari Washington out there as well, but they're going to need guys to step up next to them and be rotational pieces, and not only, solid rotational pieces, but make big-time plays. So I think Oregon will be very active. I think the edge rushing position is more talented than the defensive tackle position, in my opinion, but there's still a lot of question marks. Mateo Uiagalelei, I expect to take a big step forward. Jordan Burch, I'm a little bit more skeptical of because he hasn't taken that step forward yet. But I think this is a very talented group, but they're definitely going to need some help across that D-line. I think they could also dip their toe into the offensive line pool if the right guy comes available this spring. But one team that is absolutely going to find their way into the offensive line pool is Ohio State. They absolutely need to build out kind of the rotational pieces of that room. I think it's a solid room overall. I don't think they'll be hurting too much, but I definitely do think there is going to be some need for some rotational guys, some need for them to build it out. This might be the most complete roster overall across the country, just very few holes, but if I had to find one, then O-line would definitely be it. And then just kind of a side note about their spring practices, this QB battle is getting very, very real. I would tune in April 20th because it's going to get wild. But we will break that down in a update on spring practice here, maybe tomorrow actually. But Michigan, these last two teams, it's all about the wide receivers. And it's Michigan and it's Penn State. Two teams that I think we all expect to be in that position. Alex Orji has been doing a good job of running the offense this spring, it seems. He has kind of stepped into that starting role that some people were worried that he wouldn't be able to. Now, still tons of work to do in a spring game coming up this Saturday that will be absolutely huge for him, but you need to get him weapons because he's not going to be a prolific passer. That's just not who he is. So you need to get him weapons to where just put it in their hands and let them fly type of thing. So it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of build this out. Obviously, Michigan has a different type of wide receiver they like than other people, but I think they could use a straight-up speedster, a guy that they can just run on a drag or run on a end-around or whatever, and just let him pick up chunk yards, because I think it would take this offense that looks a little bit stagnant at times and make it into much more dynamic, spread out these teams even more, and then Donovan Edwards can have the remarkable year that I expect him to. And then Penn State, another team that I think needs a wide receiver. Julian Fleming has done a great job so far has done plenty of what they've asked him to do, and I think he's capable of being a number one. I just don't know how capable or how much of a number one he can be. I think Lambert Smith is someone that is very talented, did a really solid job in terms of what they needed from that wide receiver room and what they were getting. He was the guy that was providing a lot of that offense from that room, but I'm not super confident he can be the guy that they really, really need him to be. And even if he is, and even if Fleming finds his way into wide receiver one and you have the 1 and 2 taken care of, you need difference makers. All of these teams across the country, especially the ones that Penn State is going to be running into, have 3 or 4 or 5 guys that they can go to at the wide receiver position. And if you only have 2, as well as some talented tight ends, it's going to be tough. I won't lie. So I think Penn State is in a position where if a wide receiver comes on the portal, I would be surprised if Penn State did not at least make the call or did not at least show some type of interest. But that'll do it for this edition of the transfer portal needs for the top teams going into spring. They will definitely, I will definitely do more of these throughout the week, maybe 2 or 3 more of these just to break down more teams and give you an idea of where everyone's heading. And then we'll do some reactions to the craziness that I think is going to unfold starting on April 15th. But for the time being, we'll take our last break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the UFL, a little Good Vibes Monday for you all. Talk about the UFL and kind of how it's giving a little bit of viability to a new opportunity for college football players to live out their dream and play pro ball. So stick with us and we will be right back with that.